Rabbi Yoshua. We just heard the whole section of the explanation where he explained the first riddle, where they said to him, tell us something that is patently false. And he says, we had this mule that gave birth, and it had this label with all the money for father, the money owed to father. He explained that the whole thing is all about idolatry. And now Reb Nachman comes to the explanation of the second riddle, which says that when salt goes off, what do you salt it with? Because, as Reb Nachman had explained in the earlier section of the whole teaching, that the whole repair of the appetite, the craving for wealth, is precisely through this thing that he's called the covenant of salt, which is the concept of charity, of chopping off and reducing your money and giving some of it to Tzedakah, but that way that protects the person from this appetite for wealth. So they then, the elders of Athens say to Rabbi Yoshua, if a person has already repaired his bris, he's already repaired himself on the level of a bris, what happens if he then afterwards falls into this filthy desire for wealth? Now this is a very real issue. It's in the history of Chassidus. You actually saw that the beginning generation of Chassidus was complete spiritual purity and devotion and innocence, but within a few generations there were Babas and Rebbes who are sitting there and raking in the funds and living in this very prosperous court with heirs and graces, and your Streimel's got to be like this, and your Bekish has got to be like that. And so what do you do if religion itself, if the Chassidus itself gets sidetracked into Taivas Mammon, the desire for wealth? What's the tikkun? So Rabbi Yeshua answers them. Now he goes a level deeper. He says the placenta of the mule. He says, in truth, there is another repair for the appetite for wealth. And that remedy, that tikkun, is if the person will gaze to the very roots of wealth. What is the root? Where is wealth rooted from? Where is the root out of which comes all the money, all the wealth, all the blessings, all the flow into the world? Because if a person will not just look at the products, the furnishings, the fabrics, and the gadgets and the vacations, but if they will look, where does wealth altogether come from? When he looks to that spiritual root, on that level where the blessing, the shefa, is all light, it's all pure, it's all spiritual delight. Because it's only down below that there is taiva, there is this appetite, this wealth. But up above, if one looks at the spiritual root, that will nullify a person's gross material lusts. So who is the simple person that would turn aside from gazing at the spiritual root of the shefa, which is really HaKadosh Baruch Hu, really the Torah, really the roots of all creation? Who would turn aside from that and go and get involved in some coarse, gross, physical lust? But the only way that you can come to gaze upon the root of wealth is through the repair of the bris. You won't be able to look up and enjoy that pure source of shefa without first rectifying the covenant, like it says in Job, Mi besori echazeh Elokai. It's from my flesh that I perceive God. Only when your flesh is rectified with the covenant is it possible to see the divine source. So the first thing is to repair the holy flesh, and then the person will be able to look up to the godliness, which is the source of all the blessings. And that's why the very foundation for the repair of material lust for material wealth is through the concept of the covenant. And when a person repairs his attachment to the covenant, he won't fall into the lust for money in the first place. He will be immunized against it, because through the salt of the covenant, the lust for money will be reduced. So the source of all the wealth and the blessing is alluded to in the debate between Rabbi Yeshua and the elders of Athens by the concept of the placenta of the mule, because the placenta is precisely where the embryo grows. It's the placenta which nourishes the embryo, and therefore the placenta is a fitting symbol for the roots of wealth. That is where the embryo is resting during the time of the pregnancy. For the placenta is called the dalsei beten, the doors of the belly, because there are two doors in the inside the anatomy of the woman. Job said, why did God not close the doors of the belly in which I was an embryo? And these doors are made of, each door is a dalet. The Hebrew word for a door is a delet, and each of the doors is a dalet. And when you put the two doors together, they make a mem. When you put two dalets together, they form a mem, one above and one below. So this is the 40 days of formation of the embryo in the womb, the first 40 days, the first critical 40 days. And likewise, up above there are the doors of the heavens, the gates of the heavens, out of which comes down all the blessings into the world, like it writes in Psalm 78. God opened, in the wilderness, when Israel was in the wilderness, God opened the doors of the heavens and He rained down upon them food like the dust. So now we can understand Rabbi Yeshua's answer to the elders of Athens. He says that why did he say that is the placenta of the mule that will be the repair of somebody who is having to guard his covenant when he falls into the lust for wealth? So the elders of Athens say back to him, how could there be a placenta for a mule? The mule doesn't give birth, because idolatry doesn't even have a womb to give birth. It's completely fruitless, it's completely neutered, it's completely castrated. So he says to them, and in any case, well, how could the salt ever go off? If you really have the bris, it's not going to go off anyway. There won't be a case where somebody who's shomer bris, who goes about Parnasa with the purity of the covenant, with the appropriate charity, that he's going to go off track anyway. And that is the answer of Rabbi Yeshua to the elders of Athens. The truth is that whoever repairs the bris, in other words, he goes about his livelihood activities in a disciplined way, knowing that this is for Shemaim, it's all for the glory of God, he won't fall into the craving for wealth. Now it says in Psalms 55 that men of blood and treachery will not live out half of their days. And what this means is that somebody who goes into opposition against the tzaddik will fall into the lust for money, and all of his days will get wasted away by chasing after superfluous extras. And that is what the psalm means when it said they won't live out half their days, because our rabbi said that when a person dies, he never gets even half of what he really wanted. So these people who are sunk in the desire for money, they don't get half of what they want in the world. And it was with this that Reb Nachman's manuscript of this teaching comes to an end. A few extras which run for quite a time. We will not have time, I think, this evening to cover them all. I'd just like to read you some critical sections which Reb Nassan, Reb Nachman's scribe, wrote down, where he enters into a little more detail about the pathology of the craving for